I'm the kind of person who usually keeps quiet, not because I don't have things to say, but because saying them never really changed anything in my family. Growing up, I had a younger sister, Emma. We were inseparable as kids. We'd play together, share secrets, and even sleep in the same bed when we were scared. I used to think she was my best friend. But things changed slowly and painfully. And honestly, I still don't fully understand when it started slipping away. As we got older, my mother started favoring Emma more and more. It was subtle at first. A little more praise for her school project, more time spent with her on weekends. But eventually it became obvious. Emma could do no wrong. If she broke something, it was an accident. If I did the same, I was careless. If she stayed out late, she was just being social. If I did, I was disrespectful. It wasn't just favoritism. It felt like I was never enough, no matter how hard I tried. That's when I started to feel like the outsider in my own home. The black sheep. They never used the word, but their actions screamed it. My father stayed out of it most of the time. He worked long hours and barely noticed the tension. And my mother? She would say things like, "Emma has such a bright future," or, "Emma's so responsible." Never mind that I was working part-time jobs while going to school, paying for my own things, even helping around the house more than Emma ever did. But none of that mattered. I was always second place. Always too loud, too opinionated, too sensitive, too much of everything. So I learned to pull back. I started keeping to myself. I focused on getting out of that house, out of that role they had boxed me into. I worked hard. I studied. I took on 2 jobs and eventually moved into a small apartment of my own. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every dollar I earned meant something because no one gave it to me. Even after all that, I still hoped for some kind of connection with them. Some acknowledgement that I wasn't invisible. But the more I showed up, the more I realized I was only seen when they needed something. From my time, from my pocket, or from my silence. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I got the call. I remember it clearly because I was at work, already juggling 3 deadlines, when my phone buzzed with my aunt's name flashing across the screen. We weren't exactly close, so seeing her name made me pause. I picked up, and her voice was as sharp and formal as always. No greeting, no warmth, just straight to the point. "Oh, by the way," she said like she was mentioning the weather, "Emma's engagement is this Saturday. Thought you should know." I blinked, confused. "This Saturday? That's in 3 days." "Yes," she replied, clearly unbothered. "The invitations went out a while ago, but there must have been a mix-up with yours. Anyway, it's at the Grand Oak Hall. Be there at 6. That was it. No apology. No explanation for why I was the only one who didn't know. Just a last-minute notice, as if someone suddenly remembered I existed and thought, might as well let her come too. I hung up, staring at my phone for a moment, unsure whether to feel angry or just tired. But deep down, I still had this stubborn part of me that wanted to believe things could change. That maybe, just maybe, Emma wanted me there and this was all some oversight. So I told myself to go. Not out of obligation, but out of hope. Hope that showing up might mean something. I didn't want to come empty-handed either. I knew how my family talked behind backs. If I brought something cheap, they'd whisper. So I did something a little crazy. I dipped into my savings and bought her a high-end espresso machine, the kind that costs more than most rent. It was sleek, top of the line, over $8,000 after tax. But I wanted to show that I supported her, even if we'd grown distant. I wanted to make a statement, not for them but for myself. The saleswoman at the store even raised an eyebrow when she saw the price tag. "Big gift," she said with a smile. "Big family," I replied, forcing a laugh. As I walked out of that store, gift in hand, I told myself this could be the moment things shifted. Maybe Emma would see I was trying. Maybe my mom would smile at me for once and mean it. Maybe I wouldn't feel like an outsider at my own sister's engagement. I should have known better. The evening of the engagement arrived faster than I expected. I stood in front of my closet for almost an hour, trying to decide what to wear. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I also didn't want to be the one people whispered about. In the end, I chose a simple navy blue dress. Elegant, clean, and something that made me feel comfortable in my own skin. I pulled my hair back, did a little makeup, and slipped on my modest heels. Nothing flashy, just enough to say, I showed up. I held the gift carefully in both hands as I approached the venue. Grand Oak Hall was just as fancy as its name suggested. Glass chandeliers glowing through the tall windows, soft music floating out the door. I took a deep breath before walking in. Inside, everything was gold and white. The kind of setting you'd find in a bridal magazine. I could see people already mingling, drinks in their hands, voices rising with laughter. The moment I stepped through the door, it felt like the air changed. Heads turned. Eyes flicked in my direction. Some people stared a little too long, like I was a stranger who wandered into the wrong party. I caught one of my cousins nudging another, whispering something behind a fake smile. I held the gift a little tighter and kept walking. I spotted my mother across the room. She was in a champagne-colored dress, surrounded by a small group of women who looked like they'd stepped out of a country club ad. I made my way toward her slowly, thinking maybe I'd get a nod or a quick hug. But when I reached her, she barely looked at me. Just a quick glance and a tight-lipped, "You made it," before turning back to her conversation. No smile. No warmth. Just the same cold wall she always built between us. I scanned the room for Emma. It was her night after all. She was standing near the stage, laughing with her fiancé and a few friends. I waited until she looked in my direction. She smiled for a second, waved briefly like she was checking a box, and then turned back to her group without even walking over. No hug. No real greeting. Nothing. A few older relatives came up to me, their faces a mix of politeness and surprise. One of them even said, "Didn't think we'd see you here." I forced a smile and nodded. I didn't ask what they meant. I didn't want to know. I walked over to the gift table, placed the espresso machine down gently and stepped back. I stood near the edge of the room, blending into the background. I wasn't there to cause a scene. I wasn't even angry, just tired. Tired of always feeling like I didn't belong, like I was an extra in someone else's story. So I stood quietly, observing everything. Every cold shoulder. Every fake smile. Every unspoken word hanging in the air. The music softened and someone tapped a spoon against a glass. It was time for the engagement toast. A hush fell over the room as people turned toward the stage. Emma's fiancé stood up first, said a few sweet words, and then Emma joined him. She thanked everyone for coming, talked about love and family, and shared a few memories. People clapped, smiled, nodded along. It was the kind of moment that should have felt warm and happy. But I stood there, invisible, like an outsider watching from behind a glass wall. Then there was a pause. Guests started raising their glasses. I thought maybe this was my chance. Just a small gesture to show I was genuinely happy for her, despite everything. So I stepped forward slightly, lifted my glass and said with a gentle smile, "Glad to be part of this." There was a beat of silence. Just long enough for me to feel exposed. Then my uncle from 2 tables away laughed and said loudly, "You weren't. We added you last minute." The room froze. A few people chuckled nervously. Others looked at each other, unsure if they were supposed to laugh or feel uncomfortable. My smile didn't move. I just stood there, glass still raised, heart thudding in my chest like a drum. My mother leaned in close, her voice sharp like a needle. "Try not to ruin it like always," she whispered. I turned to look at her. She wasn't even looking at me. Just smoothing her dress, fixing her lipstick. Like nothing had happened. Like I didn't matter. Then I looked at Emma. My sister. My childhood partner in everything. We used to build blanket forts and share secrets. We used to talk about our weddings, our futures. I searched her face for something, anything. Maybe discomfort, maybe anger at how I was treated, maybe just a little sisterly concern. But she didn't even blink. She took a sip of her drink and looked away. And in that moment something in me shifted. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just a quiet, painful clarity. I was the joke. The unwanted guest. The afterthought. I lowered my glass without saying another word. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I just smiled. A small, calm, knowing smile. And then I walked over to the gift table. The $8,000 espresso machine sat there, wrapped perfectly with a handwritten card that I'd spent too much time on. I picked it up, steady and silent. A few heads turned. People watched me, confused. I walked away from the crowd, gift in hand, heart strangely steady. I didn't head for the exit. Yet. I just stepped out of the main area into the hallway where the noise faded into a quiet hum. I stood there listening to the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses behind me. But I wasn't part of it. Not really. And I never had been. The air outside was cool and for a moment it helped me breathe. I stepped out into the small courtyard behind the hall, the kind that's usually reserved for quiet moments or cigarette breaks. I didn't care who saw me. I just needed space. I sat down on the edge of a stone bench and for the first time all evening I let my hands shake. I looked down at the gift in my lap, still wrapped, still perfect. That espresso machine wasn't just an expensive gesture. It was nearly 2 months of my savings. I'd skipped buying a new laptop, pushed back some car maintenance and cut down on my groceries just to afford it. I did it because I wanted to show her, that I was trying, that I cared, that I still hoped deep inside maybe this family would see me. But now sitting alone all I could feel was foolish. I thought back to all the birthdays, weddings and holidays over the years. The ones I wasn't invited to or the ones I found out about from social media or through a cousin's offhand comment. And yet somehow they always remembered me when someone needed money or a last-minute favor, or help organizing something they didn't want to deal with. I was useful when it benefited them, but never really wanted. And then I remembered something that made my heart stop for a second. The venue. I had helped book the hall weeks ago. Emma had called me sounding desperate. She said her credit card was maxed out and their backup plan fell through. The venue was going to cancel if they didn't get a deposit that day. I didn't think twice. I used my card. I told them it was temporary, just until the final payments were made. She promised it would be taken care of before the event. I didn't even ask for thanks. But tonight, after all that humiliation, all I could think was, why am I still helping people who treat me like this? I reached into my purse and took out my phone. My fingers hovered for a moment over the banking app. I knew what I was about to do. I knew it wasn't petty, it was survival. It was reclaiming my self-worth. I opened the app, found the transaction and canceled the card linked to the venue. Just like that. One tap. It was done. I placed my phone beside me on the bench and sat quietly. The wind moved the leaves around my feet. The laughter from inside the hall kept drifting out, distant now. I waited. Not for drama. Not for revenge. Just for something to shift. For the balance to return. And deep down I knew, it would. I sat there on that stone bench, completely still, almost peaceful in a strange way. The wind rustled the trees around me and I could still hear the muffled sound of laughter and music from inside. Until suddenly I couldn't. The music stopped. At first I thought maybe it was just a song change or a technical hiccup. But then I heard voices rising. Confused murmurs. A few shouts. Someone calling out for the coordinator. I stayed seated, watching through the glass windows as people began to shift around like something was truly wrong. Then the lights went out. Not all at once, but in sections. First the chandeliers above the dining tables, then the stage lights, then the hallway lamps. The place started to dim and it looked like confusion was quickly turning into full-on panic. Within minutes, the door to the courtyard burst open and the venue coordinator came rushing out. She was talking frantically on her walkie-talkie, waving her hands as she tried to get someone on the line. Her voice carried as she shouted into her earpiece. No, the payment didn't go through. I don't know what happened. I need a manager here, now. I didn't move. I just sat there, legs crossed, my phone still beside me. And then it started. The buzzing. My phone lit up again and again. Calls. Messages. Notifications one after another like a waterfall. I picked it up and stared at the screen. 20 missed calls. 35. 70. 92. By the time I unlocked it, the number had climbed to 130 missed calls. All within less than an hour. And the texts, they were worse. From my sister, what did you do? The power is out and the DJ left. Are you serious right now? From my cousin, you ruined everything. You couldn't just let her have one good day. From my mother, you embarrassed this entire family. You're a disgrace. How could you be so selfish? You always make things about you. Not a single message asked if I was okay. Not a single person tried to understand what had led up to this moment. To them I was just the villain like always. The black sheep who just had to cause a scene. But I didn't feel like a villain. For the first time in a long time I felt like someone who had finally drawn a line. I read each message slowly. I didn't react. I didn't cry. I didn't explain. I just blocked them one by one. Sister. Walked. Mother. Walked. Cousins. Walked. The more I blocked, the lighter I felt. Like years of resentment and unspoken pain were lifting off my shoulders. They'd built this moment. Not me. I had given everything. My time, my money, my patience. And all I ever got in return was silence, judgment, and fake smiles. Now I had given something else. Silence in return. The venue was falling apart inside. No music. No lights. Guests wandering around, confused and irritated. I imagined the looks on their faces when the staff told them the payment didn't go through. I knew they'd spin it however they wanted. Blame me. Spread stories. Paint me out to be bitter or jealous. But I didn't care anymore. Because for the first time their voices couldn't reach me. The next morning I was making tea when I heard the furious pounding on my door. I didn't even need to look through the peephole to know who it was. My sister's voice followed the knocking, loud and shrill. Open the door. I know you're in there. I took a deep breath and opened it slowly. There she stood, hair a mess, makeup smudged from crying, still in the same clothes from the night before. She stormed past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. How could you do that to me? She yelled. Do you have any idea what kind of humiliation you caused? The venue threw us out. Half the guests left early. People were whispering about us all night. I stayed quiet for a moment. Then I walked in behind her, sat on the armrest of the couch and looked at her straight in the eyes. Do you even hear yourself right now? I asked calmly. Not once have you asked me why I did it. Not once have you thought about how I felt standing there last night. She scoffed. You felt embarrassed? That's your excuse for ruining my engagement. I shook my head, my voice still even. No. I felt invisible. Like always. Like I felt my whole life. I was invited at the last minute like a leftover guest. I was made to feel like a burden from the second I arrived. Even during the toast I tried to be polite to show support, and you let everyone humiliate me. She threw her hands up. Okay, maybe that was wrong. Maybe Uncle went too far. But you didn't have to destroy the whole night over it. My voice didn't rise. I didn't shout. I just told her the truth. You didn't want me there because you cared about me. You wanted me there because you needed my card. Because your credit was maxed out and you knew I'd cover it without asking questions. You used me. Just like the rest of the family always has. Her face changed. For a second I saw the guilt flicker in her eyes. But she covered it quickly with anger. I didn't make you pay for anything. You offered. I nodded slowly. Because I thought this time maybe, just maybe, I mattered. I see now that I don't. Not to you. Not to Mom. Not to anyone. She stood there for a while, shifting uncomfortably. I'm sorry you feel that way. But you went too far. You humiliated all of us. I didn't flinch. No. I showed you how it feels when someone takes something important from you. I didn't ruin your engagement. I just stepped away from a family that never truly saw me. She stormed out after that. No hug. No real apology. Just slamming the door behind her. That was the last time I saw her in person. After she left, I picked up my phone and blocked her number. Then I blocked Mom. Then the cousins. The aunts and uncles. One by one. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It was mine. The days after the engagement were strangely quiet. At first it was jarring. I'd spent years trying to earn the approval of my family, trying to fit into a place that was never meant for me. But now I found myself sitting in that silence, and instead of it feeling like loneliness, it felt like freedom. I woke up every day without the weight of their expectations on my shoulders. I no longer had to worry about pleasing anyone. For the first time in years I had my own space, my own time. And in that time, I realized just how much I had neglected myself while trying to live up to their standards. I started focusing more on what I wanted. It didn't take long for me to remember a small business idea I had tossed aside years ago. Something I had always wanted to try but never had the confidence to pursue. The idea was simple. A small online shop that would feature handmade products from local artisans. I had a love for crafting and a passion for supporting small businesses, so why not merge both into one? The $8,000 I'd planned to use for that extravagant gift? It wasn't a gift at all. It was my hard-earned money, and now it was an investment in myself. I used the money to set up my business. Bought supplies, created a website, and spent hours researching the best ways to market my products. In the beginning it was slow. I wasn't expecting a miracle overnight. There were late nights when I questioned myself, wondering if I was just being foolish. But I pushed through. I started small, but I put my heart into it, and slowly things began to change. The orders trickled in. Word spread. And before I knew it, I was making a steady income. More than I had ever made working a 9-to-5 job. Each month my business grew. I could finally say I was doing something for myself. Not for anyone else. I wasn't trying to live up to anyone's expectations or prove my worth to a family that never valued me. I was building something I could be proud of on my terms. I felt a sense of calm that I had never known before. I wasn't waiting for a phone call from my mother or an apology from my sister. I wasn't trying to fit in at family gatherings or seeking their approval at every turn. I realized I didn't need it. For once I felt whole just as I was. I was enough, with or without their validation. The silence from my family was no longer an empty void. It was healing. It was the space I needed to finally grow into who I was meant to be. I wasn't weighed down by guilt or shame anymore. I had let go of the toxic ties that had held me in place for so long, and in doing so I had found my peace. I thought back to the day of the engagement, to the moment when I walked away from their judgment and humiliation. I had taken control of my own story. No longer was I the scapegoat, the afterthought, the one who was always supposed to keep quiet and keep giving. I had learned something invaluable in that moment. Sometimes, peace comes when you finally stop showing up for people who never saw you as enough. And that peace, it was worth more than any gift or approval could ever be.